We were told by President Biden repeatedly that escalation is the thing to be concerned about when it comes to Russia. You can't have Ukraine in a situation where they're trying to escalate things, engaging more tensions with the Russians because you don't know what's going to happen. This has been almost a paralyzing fear of Joe Biden and part of a foreign policy that has said, hey, we'll give you bullets. Hey, we'll give you weapons. No, we're not sending troops. Rightfully so. No, we're not going to have a no-fly zone because that would commit us in an act of war. Hey, we're not so sure about NATO, although they've been too much sounding the sirens that they would accept NATO membership. And no long-range missiles. We don't want to have further confrontation. Maybe long-range missiles would have helped 2 years ago, a year ago, 8 months ago. But now in the waning days of the Biden presidency, we're seeing Joe Biden be fine with long-range missiles being utilized by Ukraine to allow them to attack 100 to 190 miles into Russian territory. Tony Katz Today, good to be with you. Major Mike Lyons joins us right now, retired United States Army, West Point graduate military analyst. Talk to me about what it is that changed where Joe Biden is now, and we've had parts of this conversation before, not only okay with the use of long-range weapons being utilized, long-range missiles, but almost ambivalent to the, let him go, let him do, let him see. I don't necessarily think what I'm getting from him is conviction, but rather, oh, sure, it's fine by me now. What is the story here?
Yeah, Tony, it's a very almost fatalistic approach to foreign policy from a administration that is all they've done is really manage the slow defeat of Ukraine at this point. Wars are supposed to be won and not managed, and that's what they've tried to do here. They've been so concerned about escalation on things that never were going to really happen. They didn't provide Ukraine with the material from the very beginning. Things came at a drip pace. And now we're at the point where when the new Trump administration comes in, we know that this administration wants to settle this conflict and get it over with. That's going to mean concessions. We know likely on Ukraine's side. We're not sure what that means on Russia's side. I'm just really surprised that that this is happening at this point. It's almost a mea culpa that this policy has failed. And now, again, we see this managing war as opposed to trying to win war. We see it in the same thing in the Middle East as well. And this administration has really taken to turns and kicked the can down the road.
First, let's talk about the actual weapons at play here, affectionately called through the acronym ATACMS. ATACMS missiles. What are these missiles?
So long range, they're rocket assisted, they're wrap rounds. They have a lot of capability to go much deeper. Long range fires. We didn't think that artillery was going to have the impact it's had, but this has become a trench war of World War I with artillery rounds being so important. 155 in particular, they'll shoot about 20 kilometers, or let's say 14 miles between sides. ATACMS will shoot out to 300 kilometers. They'll have much more effectiveness at greater ranges, looking at deeper targets, targeting operations that are supporting logistical supply chains, things like that. And in this case, though, the Biden administration has restricted this to the Kursk region. They've restricted it to the defense. Now, again, these kind of weapon systems are not defensive. They're offensive. They're designed to be shot deep into enemy territory and then followed up with the offense. So they're still being constrained as to how they could use them. We'll see whether or not Ukraine does that. What you could have them target, for example, are North Korean troops. How crazy would that sound? North Korean troops that are deep hiding inside of Russia someplace before they're being deployed into Kursk, because Russia is looking to form this offensive operation to take that landmass.
Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army military analyst. You have 10,000 North Korean troops right now in Russia. Basically a trade. Hey, we would like to stop throwing Russian bodies at this problem that we created. We'd like to throw your bodies at this. And here is some oil and here is some cash. To which Kim Jong-un said, go take 10,000 bodies. If you need 10,000 more, we've got more where that came from. The idea that this is just the Kursk region, this is the area where the Ukrainians were able to get a tremendous amount of square miles of Russian territory. It was almost seen as a surprise. You know, they've got the issues in what's known as the Donbass, that southeast part, Donetsk and Luhansk, but through this area of Kursk, more north, they're able to really get a hold of things, getting the Russians and Vladimir Putin by surprise. So there's really a story here about how poorly managed this Russian military is. They can throw bodies at things, but they're not very much a fighting force. But these missiles go 100 to 190 miles, as I've read in the reporting, into the area. Is Vladimir Zelensky's desire to go after those logistical areas that you're discussing? Or is it quite literally to move the Russian people into saying, we're living under threat, this war has to end?
Yeah, I think they want to use them for military targets, and that's what the United States is going to constrain them to, because battle damage assessment will be done by the U.S. and U.S. satellites, seeing where these targets actually hit. They're not designed necessarily to be fired into the Kursk region, for example, as those places are occupied by Ukraine forces. So any of these kinds of fires, again, are deep threats, and they're designed to go after targets where, for example, air strips and the like, where they're storing airplanes that are doing some of the bombings here. It just gives Ukraine military just more range when it goes through and tries to attack deep inside of Russia. They would have been much more effective in the beginning of the conflict, for example, in trying to defend getting Crimea back and trying to go after the bridge that is down the south part of Russia, that land bridge that's there. It would have been much more effective there as they went on the offense. But from this point, they're not game changing. I don't think that's going to be anything like that. I think you're going to see them just to be used to attack some of those deeper targets inside of Russia right now, as before the war finally winds down.
If Ukraine had been able to use these long-range weapons 8 months ago, we have a different war. The war's over now. We don't have to think about it anymore.
Well, I think used synchronized with other forces, in the offense, they would have been able to strike much deeper into Russia and then potentially marched on Moscow on some reason. Let's go back and look how this war has gone down with what we saw with the Wagner Group and all these different organizations that were brought to the battlefield that didn't have any impact here. And what we've seen Ukraine do is fight like a Western military when it comes to synchronizing its forces. Had we provided them with F-16s, had we provided them with the air support, better air defense platforms, long-range fires, I think they would have synchronized most of it together and become much greater a threat offensively than they have been now. They've had to just put it together piecemeal and fight, very much in a manner that has been constrained, one hand tied behind their back. But they likely would have used the areas that the Russians controlled and just bypassed them and then struck deep into Moscow, making that the target. Everybody's military is a center of gravity. And so they wanted to go deep into that target, whereas that's what Russia was trying to do initially inside Ukraine, attack into Kyiv, and they failed miserably at it.
Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army military analyst. So now you're the Trump administration, realizing that this is the situation that Biden is committing you to, and now you not only are you trying to, as you have promised, to get this war to end. I can make it end in a day. I don't think it ends in a day, of course. But now, how is that done, considering that Vladimir Zelensky has more capability to engage in more actions?
Well, eventually they're going to run out of that capability. So the first thing the Trump administration likely does is turn off the spigot. I think that you hear the comments coming out of the administration of trying to Trump-proof this solution that's there. It's already left. The horse has left the barn on this. There's no issue where they will eventually run out of ammunition, run out of artillery ammunition. Although we're starting to produce it now at a rate that they needed for 2 years ago. But at this point now, we went from something like 40,000 rounds a month to like over 100,000 rounds. So it's good for the United States in order to kind of crank that up. Anyway, I don't think I think the spigot gets turned off. I think that there's going to be a forced sit down here, and just the question is, what does that negotiation look like? What specifically does Ukraine give up?
Now, You really took it into a part two, right? Which is your first was Trump will turn off the spigot, will stop these things from taking place. The idea that Trump can bring these two people to a table, I don't actually expect that to be the case. But if you're advising Trump and he wants to see an end to this, what is the leverage point at this stage of the game after these couple of years? The Ukrainians have proven that they can just sit there and take punches and actually throw some punches. The Russians have proven that they'll throw any body they can at this. They don't actually care how long it takes. The Ukrainians clearly can't take as long as the Russians. But honestly, if we're talking about the idea of achieving an end to this thing that Joe Biden seemingly has now committed us to, as opposed to helping end quicker months ago or more than a year ago. What are you advising President Trump as to the strategy to create the solution?
I think that the administration will take this tact with Russia that says, aren't you tired of being a vassal state of China? I think that Russia has lost its stature in the world and in the last 3 years. And it is a vassal state of China now and is aligned with North Korea and China and Iran and these other countries. The Russians could begin to fund the Houthis more and the like. I think that Trump tries to do a business deal with the Russians and says, look, if you stop this, we're going to do what we can, lift all the sanctions, we'll make Russia rich again and make Russia that global power it's trying to become. That's kind of dangerous on one level, and that will be perceived as unpatriotic in some ways in some areas. But I think
dangerous on one level might be the understatement of the year, Major.
Yeah, no, but I think that's the tack that Trump will initially try. Everything from him is transactional. It goes through the eyes of dollars and cents. And he looks at what, to make Russia a more formidable country. It is not in our advantage to have Russia more aligned with India and with China and these other countries, right, if you kind of do the math there. So I think that's where his approach is going to be.
Major Mike Lyons, a retired United States Army military analyst. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Find everything I do over at TonyKatz.com. This is Tony Katz Today.